Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for PennTESOL East this Saturday morning for our second Saturday seminar series. It's on Saturday morning, usually the second Saturday of the month, and today is our first second Saturday seminar of 2025. And we have a lineup of second Saturday seminars for February, March, and April. So we also hope to see you there as well. We have topics already lined up. Also, make sure you join us for our spring conference, PennTESOL Spring Conference, most probably in May, but more information, we will be posting it as we prepare for the conference. So today we have with us TESOL scholars and educators, Ilka, Kostka, and Rachel Toncelli. They will present on nurturing critical AI literacy. And a quick abstract of the presentation. As we know that there are a lot of developments in AI, and as these developments in generative artificial intelligence advance, teachers are called to understand more about the pedagogical benefits and challenges of AI. And students also need critical AI literacy skills to evaluate AI and determine appropriate and ethical use. So in this seminar, we will collectively explore ways to strengthen students' critical AI literacy skills through co-creating AI guidelines and engaging them in interactive activities. So our seminar is geared towards English language teachers with a range of experience with generative AI. And I would like, and also please feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat so that towards the end of the webinar, we will be able to have a question and answer discussion. So I now give the floor to Rachel and Ilka to start with their presentation. Also with us is our PennTESOL East President, Bill Albertson, and he will be monitoring also the chat as well. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to this wonderful presentation where we're going to learn a lot of practical things that we can use in the ESL classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen, for the warm welcome. Rachel and I are really happy to be here today to talk to you about critical AI literacy in the English language classroom. We both teach international students in Pathways programs at Northeastern University in Boston. So we're joining you from New England. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to jump right in today. So the question is, why are we talking about critical AI literacy? Well, as we all know, generative AI and AI more generally is developing at a rapid pace. These tools are becoming more sophisticated, more powerful, more prevalent. And we know that students are using them and many of us are using them as well. So as a result, our practice has to evolve in order to keep up with these developments. And this is where critical AI literacy comes in. We want to make sure that in everything that we're doing with AI, with our students, with our colleagues, and also with our own work, that we're using AI in an ethical, responsible, safe, and critical way. So it might seem like these developments are sudden and rapid and kind of came out of nowhere, but the reality is that AI has really been in our daily life. If we look at the tools here on the screen that many of us use, that there's AI embedded in these platforms. You might have also seen one of the first AI-generated commercials. It's been actually quite controversial. At the end of last year, it was an advertisement for Coca-Cola. And I think that we're going to be seeing more AI-driven marketing in the future. In case you're wondering what kinds of tools are available, you could go to this website. It's called there'sanaIforthat.com. And as of yesterday, there are more than 27,000 AI tools. And this website's used by over 40 million humans. And what you can do is you can search for a particular tool, for a particular feature. So you could look for a video generation tool or a chatbot or voiceover. There are tools for financial reporting, for legal advice, for social media. If you have to make a wedding speech, there is an AI for that. You can look for that. So it's just, I think, an example of how we're going to be seeing AI embedded really into so many things that we are doing. what does this mean for us? What does this mean for educators? And what does it mean for language learners? We're in this moment now where there's sort of a push-pull moment. We are exploring the affordances of AI for language learners, right? For instance, for providing them access to authentic language and supporting language tasks and personalizing language learning. But we need to consider also the limitations and the risks involved with using these tools. The big one that a lot of educators talk about is academic integrity, but there are also concerns about students using these tools too much, in which it masks their voice and reduces their critical thinking and their use of language. So AI and ELT, there are many areas in which we could focus on. We could focus on student use or the tools or learning, assessment. But today we're going to focus on critical AI literacy because this really is the foundation that we believe should undergird all of our work in AI. Again, we want to make sure that we're using it safely and ethically and responsibly. And inviting students into these discussions is what we're going to highlight today in our talk. So I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, who's going to define critical AI literacy for us.
Thank you so much, Ilka, and good morning, everyone. We want to make sure that we all have a common understanding of what we mean when we say critical AI literacy. So we'd like to share with you the definition of critical AI literacy that we developed for our forthcoming book. And that is, critical AI literacy is the ability to understand, evaluate, and ethically use artificial intelligence, recognizing its capabilities, limitations, and societal impacts, particularly in the context of education and daily life. So we see critical AI literacy as not only a tool for education, but also, and more broadly, part of our civic responsibility. And because AI itself is a moving target, we really wanted to provide a definition that was comprehensive and can hopefully withstand the changes of rapid AI development. So the question is, how do we achieve critical AI literacy? And how do we make sure that we foster this in our students? What we advocate for is a pedagogical approach to critical AI literacy. And what we mean by a pedagogical approach is an ongoing interaction with with AI output and our students. So that means exploring AI output with our students regularly. It's not a one and done conversation, excuse me, but something that we do regularly with our students so that they can understand what its limitations are and learn the ways that they can reach to it for language support. By engaging in these ongoing conversations, we establish trust through open communication with our students, and we want them coming to us with their questions and concerns. It's like teachers have concerns about AI, our students do as well. And the final part of this pedagogical approach is two-way transparency. And essentially, we as teachers are asking our students to tell us how they're using AI. We want them to cite it if they use it. And we think that if we're going to ask that of our students, we have to model it ourselves. And that means if we expect them to be open, we have to tell them how we're using it as well. So, to enact a pedagogical approach like this, we really have to be sure that we're doing it in an ethical way. Any implementation of AI with our students needs to have an ethical focus. And there are many issues that we need to think about. As I've already mentioned, we need to be transparent about our AI usage with our students. That's a really important starting place. But we also need to involve our students in creating AI guidance. So rather than an AI policy that we mandate at the outset of our classes, we actually encourage you to create guidelines alongside your students in an ongoing way. And in a few minutes, I'll walk you through that process the way that we've done it, and hopefully it will inspire you to try it out as well. Another aspect of ethical use that we think is incredibly important is protecting our students' privacy. A lot of the large language models, when you input prompts or requests or data, they collect that data. And it's really important for students to understand how their data is being collected and potentially used. So you see here, we've added in the logo for Copilot, Microsoft's large language model. And that's just to let you know that some institutions, some school districts may have institutional agreements with AI platforms. Our institution has an agreement with Copilot. So if we use it with our students, none of our data is being collected. And so that's something to really think about alongside your students. Another aspect of ethical use is offering your students the chance to opt out of AI activities. If they have an objection to using AI tools, you can have a plan B activity ready if you were planning on using AI in your class. And as teachers, we kind of all have a plan B up our sleeves all the time. So there's not really much new there, though it's taking on a different significance. Another aspect of ethical use is ensuring equitable access. So here we're saying be mindful of paywalls. Though there are many, many free opportunities to engage with AI, there are improved versions available if you're willing to pay for them. So if you're asking your students to use AI outside of school, be mindful that it may be unfair if some students have access that others don't have, and you want to think about that as you're designing activities and what you're asking your students to do outside of class. A really important additional ethical issue is avoiding AI detectors. And I said that word avoiding with great emphasis because there's a lot of talk about how we can't detect AI use. And we could have another whole seminar about how we know when we're getting AI produced language, but we are not suggesting that you use AI detectors for a few reasons. First and foremost, they don't work reliably well. And they tend to be biased towards non-native speakers of English. And so those are our students, and we don't want to use tools like this against them. Perhaps more importantly, from a philosophical perspective or an ideological perspective, when you're looking to detect your use of AI, you're really establishing a kind of a gotcha culture where you're trying to police what your students are doing. And we think that minimizes trust, which is so important in the age of AI. So we really don't think that AI detection is the way to go. Another aspect of ethical use is really committing to professional learning, like we're doing today. So thanks for coming out on a snowy Saturday to listen to our talk and engage with us. It's a lot. There's a lot of change happening fast. And we'll talk more about how you can manage that change towards the end of today's presentation. But we can't ignore that AI is out there, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and we have to continue taking steps to learn more about it so we can support our students in that effort. And the final point we want to make about ethical use is that it's important to embrace human-centric pedagogy. And right at the end of the day, it's important to keep a human in the loop in the process of teaching and learning. Relationships with our students have always been essential to language education. And I think that they are more important now than ever. So just keep in mind that, AI is out there, it's a buzz, it's important, we have to address it. But it doesn't mean that human relationships and interaction are not of the most importance in our classroom. So all in all, what we're suggesting is a shift from teachers talking about AI and mandating what students do or don't do with AI in a very teacher-centered way to a more collaborative model. In the second image, you can see the teachers and students collaborating around the discussion of AI. We think that your students should be your thought partners in this process, in this moment of great change, so that we can all, in a kind of experiential way, think about how to nurture critical AI literacy. So now that we've established a definition and we thought about some of the ethical issues relating to critical AI literacy, we want to focus on what we think are three main principles for nurturing that literacy. So the first of these is the co-creation of AI guidelines that I mentioned to you a few moments ago. So rather than mandating these are the rules and I'm going to police the rules around AI use in your classes, we suggest that you collaborate with your students to decide what those rules are. And the way we've done this is by giving our students short statements relating to the particular course that we're teaching. And then we use this kind of very friendly stoplight metaphor. It's something that everybody has seen. We ask the students to categorize those statements about AI use according to the stoplight. So, where red would be an inappropriate use of AI, like perhaps generating a paper and pasting it into your assignment and submitting it as your own. Yellow would be something that maybe is ambiguous. It's unclear. We need to talk about it. We're not sure if it's appropriate or inappropriate. And green would be an appropriate usage of AI to support learning. And ultimately, that's the question we're trying to get our students to think about. Is this use of AI something that helps me learn or not? So we give the students the scenarios, they discuss and amongst themselves, and then as a class, we discuss and reflect. What you're looking at now is a sample of the kind of shared document that Ilka used in one of her classes to do this stoplight activity. So on the left, you can see a variety of statements. Like, for example, the first one, a student uses an AI chatbot to practice English conversation skills. And the class agreed and decided that that was considered appropriate and would be fine for her class. And off they went across a variety of scenarios. Of note, we consider these guidelines living documents. So we return to them. And you can see here in the two areas we've circled at the midpoint in the semester, Ilka returned with her students and their thinking evolved. So number 5, a student uses AI to create slides for a presentation. If they already created the content, they decided further into the semester that that was okay because the student had done the thinking, done the work, and was just using it as a tool to make it visually appealing. In number 11, you can see that they added in blue the phrase that it was okay to use AI for vocabulary word study because they had begun exploring, using AI to generate sample sentences or find collocations. And Ilka will tell you more about that later in today's presentation. So let me show you another example from one of my classes. The table looks a little bit different, right? We all have our own style. And here you can see a snippet of the agreement that I made with my students. The green area, the appropriate area is not showing, but I wanted to show you this part of the guidelines we established to particularly point out what happens in the yellow area. And those were the to be discussed areas. And this is where we began to negotiate. So if you look into the additional comments, you could see when we weren't sure if it was okay, we got into a discussion and we sort of established when it was okay and when it wasn't. So the students, number 4 there said, a student asks an AI to translate a document word for word from their native language to English. And we decided as a class, well, that would be okay for personal use. And it would be okay for language comparison, right? To really compare languages or preview content. But it would not be okay to avoid the reading in English because so we're kind of teaching them how to use it through these guidelines. So we thought this has worked really, really well. And we've had great luck using it, but we really wanted to make sure that our students agreed with us. So we regularly collect student feedback about the things we're doing in class. And so we collected it on this process. And here's some of the things our students told us. One student noted it was really helpful because they know when they can use AI and when they can't use it. Another student said, it's an impressive approach to let every student participate in acting the rules of AI, which not only triggers more autonomy of students, but also gives more guidance to teach students how to use AI correctly. And it's that teaching students, which is really important. And then a final student or an additional student that we'll share with you today noted that the stoplight activity was very helpful in giving them a clear understanding of how to appropriately use AI in our class. So our students appreciated this open negotiation with us. And so just in closing, I'd like to share some of our own observations. And I've made some of these points, so perhaps I'm going to be reiterating. But the first thing I want to say again is that negotiation is meaningful. Those yellow areas or areas where the class didn't agree were really important for our conversation and gave us a lot of insight into how our students were thinking and gave them a lot of insight into how we were thinking about protecting their learning. Another important feature of this process was that we treat those guidelines like a living document. AI is racing forward and changing, and the way we're all using it is changing. And so, coming back periodically to those guidelines and renegotiating or just confirming that we still all agree has been important to the process as well. Another point that we think is quite useful is that this stoplight activity has been adaptable to a great variety of the courses that we teach simply by changing the scenarios to align with what you're teaching or what you might be asking the students to do, or how you discover they're using AI in a way that you think circumvents their learning process. Those are the scenarios you develop. And then finally, engaging with our students is a foundation for productive, ongoing conversations in class and through student feedback. So, collecting their answers, collecting their thinking, even in anonymous ways, student feedback is key. So, we encourage you to collect feedback along the way. So, another principle that I want to share with you for nurturing critical AI literacy is the idea of establishing process-focused assignments. Now, the challenge here is that if we think about a final product, something that we would traditionally assign, pretty much AI can generate anything we can think to assign. We need a presentation, AI can do that. We want a paper, AI can do that. So we need to think a little bit differently about process. What's the process that leads us to that final product? It doesn't mean we're eliminating the final product, but it means that we're scaffolding along the way and asking for deliverables from our students. The good news here is that as English language teachers, we have always been scaffolding our assignments. So we're really just building upon something that's best practice for all of us. But we're also building in opportunities for lots of in-class interaction, which has also always been important for language development and communicative skills, but perhaps is more important now than ever. And throughout this scaffolded process, we are going to talk about appropriate and inappropriate AI usage, but we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to think about how we can model it with our students as part of that ongoing pedagogical approach, where they're thinking critically about output so that they themselves understand AI limitations and capabilities. So, process over product has become a bit of cliche in the AI enhanced world. I want to make sure we understand what that means. So I'm just going to walk you through quickly a sample assignment. Now, traditionally, we might have assigned a research paper, depending on the age and grade level you teach. In our world, that happens fairly frequently. Now, when we rethink a research paper for the AI era, we're going to break it apart into process-focused deliverables, which have opportunities for our students to engage in class, interaction, which fosters communication skills and language development. But also, frankly, if your students have completely generated a part of this task on AI, they're not going to be able to successfully participate in that interaction. So they're going to need to be ready in a different way. So that live interaction matters for a lot of reasons. And then we're going to talk with them at each stage and model appropriate AI usage and inappropriate usage. So for that research paper, what could the first step be? Well, we might assign them a one-page topic selection and in which they decide on a research question or research questions. And when they come into class, we might have them present that topic to their peers in small groups for feedback so that they're engaging with their language of their ideas and having to talk about it and think it through with partners. We might then in class during the preparation for that topic selection, we might use AI to brainstorm. We might use it to experiment with refining research questions. We would then also remind them that just letting AI choose a topic without any critical thinking would be inappropriate. The next step of this process might be an annotated bibliography. We've taught them how to identify sources, And then when they come to class, when they finalized their annotated bibliography, we might ask them to do a mini presentation of what they learned in the literature, and to do a Q&A, have students ask questions and build that Q&A into the rubric. The ability to talk about your ideas really protects student learning in terms of its integrity and the risk of overuse of AI. Another thing that we can do, I did this just again yesterday with my students, is to compare personal summaries of things that they've read for a project with AI generated summaries. And this is, I just want to pause for a moment and tell you, when you generate a summary of something students have read in class, their first reaction is, wow, that is so good. It's amazing. And it's so fast. And they think it's perfect. And then when you ask them to dive in and compare it, something really interesting happens. They realize that that AI summary is a lot more superficial than some of the ideas that they generated. And that when we do it across a few summaries, that has a very consistent kind of AI voice, which flattens their own uniqueness. And so doing that with students, digging into it, so they see that even though it looks perfect, it actually isn't, is a really interesting exercise to do alongside them. And then obviously reminding them that completely generating this annotated bibliography would be wrong for a great variety of reasons, including the risk of AI to completely invent sources. Okay, the next task here might be the first draft. And here, the human interaction, which is very valuable, may likely be things you were already doing, certainly things we were already doing, peer review opportunities, faculty writing conferences. Every writer needs a reader. So it's really important for our students to have opportunities to talk about their ideas, to talk about how they were thinking when they were trying to communicate those ideas. We can model for them in class activities how they might use AI to enhance the clarity of their arguments, or to use AI to suggest counter arguments, which they can then use to strengthen their own argumentation. And of course, we would remind them that writing entire sections without original input or critical thinking would be inappropriate. And then a final process-focused deliverable in this particular assignment could be a second draft or maybe your final draft. Again, because every writer needs a reader or an audience, bring papers, ask your students to make a presentation and include the Q&A, their ability to answer, reasonable questions about their topic as part of your rubric. Again, we could model for them that AI might be useful for a final grammar and style check, but that just using AI at the last minute to generate content for them would not be appropriate. Now, I will just quickly tell you that we've done these guidelines with our students and we've noticed a significant decrease in how often we feel like we've been chat GPT'd by our students. But it still occasionally happens that a student is under pressure or it's last minute and they generate a part of an assignment. By breaking these down into lots of smaller assignments, we create spaces that are a little less high stakes for our students to make mistakes. So we can go back to those guidelines, talk to them, think together about what happened, and not let them ruin their academic career while they're in the process of learning this themselves. So now that we've kind of thought about what we mean by process, deliverables, and assignments, I'm going to pass it back to Ilka, who's going to talk to you about our third principle.
Thanks, Rachel. So the process-oriented assignment that Rachel just described was for a research paper, but we want to remind everyone that you can definitely do that same kind of process breakdown with really any kind of assignment in any kind of course. And I want you to think about that as well as I take you through some of the activities that we've used in reading, writing classes and in my own culture and communication class. So the final principle we're going to talk about is collaborative exploration. And Rachel mentioned this before, that we want to get away from gotcha in terms of AI use, and we want to get away from us versus them with students, but instead think of students as our partners in this AI exploration, our thought partners. So it's really where we want to be. And that's a principle that we believe very much in and has been an important part of our pedagogical approach to critical AI literacy. So I'm going to start with vocabulary, and to yourselves, you can think about how you would define the word irony and how would you define the word resilience. So these are two of many words that we focused on in my fall class with my graduate students. They're building their academic vocabulary, and these were in the readings. So think about these definitions. So irony is not a concept that's always easy to define. So one way that I use AI, and I do this in class with students in real time, is ask Copilot to generate sentences, sample sentences that include the word irony. So then we have multiple examples here. Like, for example, the fire station burned down, the lifeguard couldn't swim, the thief's car was stolen. So students can really get a wide range of examples in which irony is used. Now, I only generated 15 sentences. You can generate many more. They want to overwhelm students too much, and it also depends on how much time you have. But we will generate sample sentences in class. Same with the word resilience. So resilience, my definition, how I would define it, would be bouncing back, recovering from a difficult situation or a major challenge. But then what does that challenge mean? Exactly, right? What would be challenging? So when you have these examples, students can really see patterns, right? I have them analyze these collocations together. So they'll see natural disaster, an accident, a pandemic, an economic downturn. Things that are really serious are events in which you would need to build resilience. Another fun way to do this is to create images. Now, it was always difficult for me before I was using AI to find images of these kinds of terms. But when I saw that my students were kind of still struggling to understand really what resilience meant, I generated these images in class. I will say that it takes some vulnerability on our part as educators to open Copilot or open an AI tool in real time, because you don't know what you're going to get. But on the flip side, I think that's actually a good thing, because it shows students that we have to be critical when we're looking at the output. We don't know what we're going to get. It could be different each time. It could be wrong. I'll show you some examples of stereotypes in a second, but that's exactly the point, right? So here's an image that shows resilience. It's not quite perfect. You can see some of the faces are a little bit odd. There are some funny machines floating in the sky. It looks like almost like a bulldozer. I don't really know what that is. But students get the idea that this is a community that is resilient, that's rebuilding after some kind of disaster. You can also generate non-examples of the same word, which is very helpful. So we'll have students compare them and say, well, which would be, which person or which idea here, which image shows resilience. Maybe spilling your coffee on your shirt is not necessarily something that would build resilience. So these images are very powerful for helping these ideas, vocab words, stick in students' minds. Another thing you can do for retrieval practice is pull up images, and when students have their list of vocabulary words, ask them which word is conveyed in the image. So here, this one, I think both of them show irony, right? Again, the fire station on fire and being in nature, but still being disconnected. And they talked about how that doesn't work. Another way of using examples and non-examples is just by doing them in sentences. So this is a snippet of a handout that I gave my students. I asked Copilot to generate these examples and non-examples for me, and had put students into groups, and they had to analyze each one. And I think this really drives home the point that these sentences are grammatically correct, but the collocations don't work. So students had to say whether or not each sentence was a good example, a real example, or a non-example. Right? So a movie can evoke strong emotions, but a movie cannot evoke a sandwich, right? In the sense that evoke means kind of produce or call up or call forth. So it doesn't work with sandwich, even though it's grammatically correct. So you have really rich discussions about these, and students love to analyze the sentences together. Another example from a reading and a writing course. One of the first assignments that students have in this course is to create a personal narrative. It's a way for us to get to know them, for them to also practice some writing, and for us to get a sense of their writing skills. So what students had to do, this is maybe, I think, week 2 of the semester, was write a personal narrative about experiencing their first week as an international student at Northeastern University in Boston. So they had to ask Copilot to create this narrative for them. So then they had to read and evaluate the output, remembering that they are the ones that are experts of their own story, of their own experience, and think critically about the narrative that AI produced. Were there factual errors? Did they notice any stereotypes? Did this output say something interesting about them? What did they notice about language? And do they think that this would get a good grade? And here's what they saw. A lot of students found that a lot of these narratives were pretty similar, if not exactly the same, that they would arrive in Boston. The leaves have turned different colors. It's crisp in the air, which we know in Boston in September, that's not true. It's still warm. But they saw that there was a lot of kind of general story that applied to all of them. But importantly, they also noticed some stereotypes in there. So one student from China said, well, why does it think that I study computer science? A student from Thailand noticed that, oh, my narrative focused mostly on Thai cuisine. And our student from Colombia said it talked mostly about Latin music and food. So given the fact that one of the major concerns about AI is that it produces bias output and stereotypes, this is exactly why we have to draw students' attention to it, because this activity is a really powerful way for them to see that this can happen in the output. Not that we want it to, of course, but when it does happen in class, they see firsthand how important it is to critically analyze the output that they get from AI. Now, translation is a major concern. Another major concern that we hear besides academic integrity. Rachel and I have been talking to educators, both who teach English language and also who teach world languages. And the concern is, well, students are going to use AI to translate everything, and they're not really going to be using the language in an authentic way. So this is an example of Italian, which Rachel teaches. She put an English language text into Claude and had it translated. And we feel strongly that translation could be a way to raise students' metalinguistic awareness. They could look at structures, they could look at vocabulary and cognates. And here are some examples of that. So the first that we underline is purple. These are examples of cognates. And Rachel used this activity in Italian 101, right at the beginning, with students who didn't know any kind of Italian, to show them that they already have more knowledge than they believe. So showing them that, having them look for cognates, having them look at word forms. So for example, I don't speak Italian, but I could see here, delicatamente. Mente would be like ly, the adverb in English, right? So these are not that different. You can have them look at grammar. So here, this is a question of word order, all right? In Italian, the adjective comes after the noun. You can also look at plural forms, or the plural is made instead of with S, it's made with I. They can look at grammatical structures, and they could also look at false friends. So attualmente doesn't mean actually in Italian, and in other languages, it means currently. So students can compare these translations. So this could be done in class, it could be done at home. I've done translation work using AI with my students who speak Mandarin. We had an excellent discussion, a really thought-provoking discussion about the power of translation, whether, how accurate it is, how it translates. Students loved being the experts of Mandarin. Since I don't speak Mandarin, they were the ones in the driver's seat explaining to me and to everyone else why the translation, what was both good about it and what was inaccurate. So you can have really rich discussions when you invite students to critically analyze AI output. Okay. So here are some other questions that you could ask. I showed a few examples of images and sentences and text, but these are critical analysis questions that you can really use in any course, for any topic, for language structures. Really, they're kind of just general questions. So first, is the AI generated content accurate? How do you know? What other credible sources would support this output? Who is represented in the output? How does this output confirm or go against what I already know about this topic? What information is missing from the response? Look at language use. Is it accurate? Is it an appropriate register? Why or why not? And this question works particularly well when you have students analyze AI-generated emails. I'm sure many of you have gotten emails that don't seem to be written by a student, much less by a human. So it's another activity that I've done in which we generate emails. We have students critically analyze them and look at it, and especially talk about register. Is this language appropriate? Is it too formal? And so forth. So really powerful activity and a fun activity. How could you address inappropriate language use? So we'd like to share some of our takeaways here. I'm going to pass it to Rachel as we wrap up.
Thank you so much. So in terms of takeaways, we wanted to leave you with some of the most common questions that we get asked and our ideas around the answers. So we've been really fortunate to talk to English language and world language educators at a variety of institutions and school districts, and we find that we often get a lot of similar questions. So today we're going to give you our takeaways in the form of frequently asked questions, FAQs, and with, I'll give you some ideas about how we are thinking about answering these questions, but obviously these are big questions and the answers require ongoing conversation. So we would just really encourage you to continue having these conversations. So the first question, how else can I involve students and see how they are using AI? So obviously the in-class activities that we've described with you, they really open the door for conversations with our students and they foster a lot of trust. Students have told us directly they feel more comfortable talking with us about AI usage because we use it with them. So that's really important. But you can also collect feedback in anonymous ways, like exit slips are a great way to say, hey, what did you think of this activity with AI? Or how are you using AI? And then there really is a need for research in the ways that AI is impacting teaching and learning. So if you want to go a step beyond exit tips, you can conduct formal classroom-based research and share that research because we all need to be learning with and from each other. So another common question that we get is, what do I do if my school's AI policy is prohibitive and or if my colleagues aren't on the same page? First of all, in terms of the school's policy, we would say advocate to the extent that you can, because one thing we do know is that bans are not effective, right? Just banning AI usage, maybe within the school building, they can go home and use AI. So it's better for us to think about how we can teach them to use it in responsible and ethical ways to prepare them for an AI enhanced world, right? That they are already living in. In terms of the colleagues, this can be challenging. And we have, talked to a lot of educators who are, experiencing just a range of legitimate reactions to AI and how much it's changing things. What we would say is a good place to start is to find like-minded colleagues. Find colleagues who are interested in exploring AI use with you, with their students, and then make sure if there are educators in your professional context who are completely opposed to AI usage of any kind and have really rigid AI policies, make sure that your policies are really clear, that if you've established those guidelines with your students, they understand how they can use AI in your class, and remind them that they should have that understanding with each of their teachers, since people may have different ideas and that can be challenging for students. So being explicit and transparent is super important. Another question that we often get is, how do I get started with professional learning or with AI use? And here we would say, the power of one. Believe in just taking one small step can be the start of, crafting really big potential changes in your professional practice. But it's okay to start small. It's okay to start with just one activity with your students. That's how we began when ChatGPT burst into the scene of late fall of 2022. Soon after, Ilka and I each just kind of thought up an activity and tried it out in class with our students and collected their feedback. And from there, it kind of snowballed for us. So just take a single step. Another question that we often get is, I'm not an AI expert and neither are my colleagues. How do we collaborate? And, it's a fair point. For sure, we're not all AI experts, but we do all have the need to develop some of our own critical AI literacy so that we can support our students who have this need as well. So one thing you can do is just, be in conversations like today's conversations. There are lots of opportunities online, webinars, articles, a lot of active discussion on social media that can be really useful to you. But we can say, if that's intimidating, just start playing with AI in your personal life. Can it help you with recipes or your grocery list? Can it help you at work to plan a lesson or think up an activity? Just experiment a little bit. And the more you do that, the more you may get ideas for ways that you can enhance your own sense of confidence using these tools. And as Ilka mentioned, there is a decent amount of vulnerability involved in finding ourselves in this very different kind of educational landscape. So it's okay to not be an expert, and it's okay to be learning alongside your students and to be transparent about that. You're really being a great model for what a lifelong learner is. And then another question that we get a lot is simply this: I feel overwhelmed. How can I stay up to date with AI developments? We want to just acknowledge that it can be really overwhelming. Things are changing quickly, and people have a lot of feelings about that. And so they're all legitimate feelings. We just need to try to manage that change mindfully. Something that we found incredibly helpful is just working with other colleagues, finding supportive colleagues with whom you can exchange ideas. Ilka and I regularly will get together with an idea for a lesson. We'll both try it out. We'll come back and say, like, how did it go for you? What would you do differently next time? And that's been a really supportive way to just keep exploring. So we definitely would say that's a good solution to staying to feeling less overwhelmed. But in terms of staying up to date, we want to say, things are changing quickly. There are new tools all the time. But in reality, you do not have to know and use all of those tools. You can nurture critical AI literacy with your students by just using some tools, right? You don't have to be an expert, or you don't have to adapt every platform that's out there. So this is actually the really exciting part, and that is that what you know about teaching and learning is such a solid foundation for just extending that to thinking about teaching and learning relating to critical AI literacy. So with that, we're gonna ask you, actually, what's one idea that you might take away from today's seminar?
Yeah, so you can join Slido if you're not familiar with this, slido.com, and put this pin in, or you can scan the QR code. But we'd love to hear what's one idea that you'll take away from today's seminar. Takeaway for you. And in the meantime, I'm going to pop into the chat and check the questions from before. Let's see. Even if you don't recommend using AI detectors to catch AI use by your students, would you have your students use these same checkers to see where their own output might be AI generated, even if it really isn't? That's a great question.
An interesting activity, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could be. I've used Turnitin to have students check their source use before, and that's worked really well. Same idea years ago was look at the Turnitin report, check the similarity. Do you have to make any edits to your writing? Sometimes it's just, oh, I forgot the quotation marks and a direct quote, or I forgot a citation, something like that. But I'm personally not familiar with these AI the detectors, because I strongly believe that we shouldn't be using them, but it could be potentially an interesting activity. Rachel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there. I think even when it comes to Turnitin, as you said, which was, around before we had the possibility of AI and AI detectors, we always thought of it as a tool for thinking about what does effective source use look like. And so we think that by teaching our students how to use AI and how not to use AI, we kind of eliminate the need for an AI detector.
Everyone, I wonder what your approach is to teaching your students how to write and refine prompts. So prompt engineering. What's our stance on prompt engineering? I found my students have been using AI really since ChatGPT was released. I mean, that following January 2023, 70% of my students had accounts. How do I know? Because I surveyed them anonymously. So I think they've already gotten pretty good at it, but it doesn't hurt to include maybe a mini lesson on prompt engineering or to model how you can get AI to do what you want it to do. It's personally not something that I have focused on, but now that I see this question, I think we probably should be building in maybe a mini lesson or two on prompt engineering. Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that they have some of these skills, but it can be a wonderful language lesson on just refining your language for precision, right? The whole concept of an iterative prompt. You don't always get what you want out of the first prompt. Another just sort of thing that came to mind for me as an activity I did with my students was I in class had them use Copilot to generate images to capture how they were feeling. We were reflecting on goals that we had set at the start of the semester, and we were going to do impromptu presentations about whether or not they had achieved those goals. And in those impromptu presentations, they each generated an image. And so we did a lot of work going back and forth to try to get to the language they were looking for to get the image they want. And so those kind of activities can be super fun for students, and you're really targeting precision in language. And so, yeah, I would say definitely explore prompt engineering with students.
And that just actually gave me a great idea that we could do a lesson on this. If we're practicing or teaching question formation, then that's a great way to practice to see if the AI can actually read the question and where a question might need to be expanded and talk about word order and questions. Thank you for that idea. And one reason why we love, I know Rachel feels the same way, why we love doing webinars and talking to educators is because we always learn so much from talking to others. So that's a really important part of managing all this change, is simply having a conversation and exchanging ideas and asking each other questions, because I always come away with great ideas when I talk to others. So yeah, that's great. Focus on the process with multiple steps. Yes, then the process, and then build an AI appropriate, inappropriate use into that process, the stoplight activity, generating images. That's great. Thank you for sharing. Feel free to continue sharing your takeaways in the chat. We have just 2 more slides and we're going to wrap up. So this is our final takeaway, something that we would like you to remember. And yes, this image was created by AI. Relationships and what we know about teaching and learning matter more than ever to humanize the classroom. So we encourage all of you to keep thinking about how we can make room for AI, how we can perhaps remain open-minded, how we can prepare students for an increasingly AI-driven world while doing what we do best and while building on the practices that we know the best as human English language educators. It feels funny to say that, but we're really not advocating for using AI for every single activity or revamping your whole entire curriculum or focusing on AI or creating accounts for many different kinds of tools, but instead kind of thinking about a way in which it works for you. And keeping in mind that critical AI literacy is going to be a skill that students will need not only for their academic study, but also in the real world. So thank you so much for inviting us to talk with you today. We'd like to share in the QR code, we're sharing an article that was just published, that Rachel and I just published last October. And this article touches on an idea that Rachel mentioned before, which was, what are instructor attitudes? What do they think? How are English language educators using AI? And what are their thoughts on it? And you'll see that they have a love-hate relationship, that's part of the title of the article, with AI. So we hope that this narrative inquiry study will be helpful for you. And we would love to hear your feedback on any of these ideas. Please feel free to send us an email. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us and for your active participation today.
Thank you so much, Ilka and Rachel, for such a wonderful presentation with a lot of pedagogical examples that we can use AI in the classroom with our students. And I like the idea of being transparent. I like the shift. I mean, I loved everything you were talking about. A lot of, I would like to review the main points you discussed and how I can also adapt it in my classroom. But also, I like the idea of the shift, like now the way we are using it and saying, no, don't use it this way, but how we can shift to having it being more collaborative with our students and getting input from them and helping us as teachers and them not to be overwhelmed by all of this information. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. We have a lot of comments in the chat and also a few questions that I will review a little in a little bit. But before I do that, I would like to welcome with us today Alicia Moreno, who has joined us today. She will be our presenter for second Saturday seminar in February. So we are excited to have her with us. Elisha, please remind me of the topic that you will be presenting so that we prepare and put that on our calendar to attend.
Sure. So I am going to be presenting a little bit about our program at Reading Area Community College. We, in September of last year, won a national award. So I'll just be talking about, the things we do that have made our program successful, and especially how we have started working more closely with local high schools to make a smoother transition for ESL students coming out of high school and going into higher education.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to your presentation, and I'm sure we all are.